YouTube, this is Kelvin. Alright, so I know you're tired of me, but I'm trying to bring you the best chess games in the history of the world. Ever. No, but like I said before, I'm following Alireza Firouzja back a little bit to the Tata still, Weekend Z, in January of this year, 2020, because there's a rest day, going on right now. They're about to start round 9 of the Norway Autobox Norway chess tournament. And so, like I said, I'm following Alireza Firouzja's games. And this game here is taken from round 5. And it is, like I said, Alireza Firouzja representing Iran with the white pieces, and Anish Giri representing Netherlands with the black pieces. So if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we got. All right, so we have a d4, d5, typical queen's pawn. So c4, that's the queen's gambit declined. And then, of course, if the pawn is taken on c4, you have the queen's gambit accepted, which you don't see as much as the queen's gambit declined at high level play. Now, with the insertion of bishop to e7, you have the Charousek or Petrosian variation. All right, so we got queen c2, c6, all right, knight f6, e3, just, making sure that that bishop is solid. And, as you notice, it doesn't really have a lot of squares to go to. So, bishop to e2, threatening the undefended knight on the rim, which usually is grim, but in this particular case, they protected with g6. Now, this is all theory. It's not the most popular theory, but it has definitely been seen before. If you notice, black has a pretty ugly kingside pawn structure. The doubled H pawns, and so normally you would think not to castle on that side, but Giri says I'm dealing with it anyway. So we have castles now. King to h8. That is a first. The first time that move has been seen. So we're in a very new game now. As you see, the d pawn is pinned along the d file. So you can take it because it's not an absolute pin, but of course you drop your queen in the process, and nobody wants to do that. All right, so we got h4, h3, just preventing any bishop g4 type tricks. And all right, so we push the pawn up here, and then we protect it with f4. All right, let's go ahead and pin that queen down. Get the king out of any danger here. All right, so there's a possibility of a little sack there on h3. So Firouzja, he went ahead and protected it further with knight to g1. All right, so we're gonna attack the undefended queen there on e7, asking it what it wants to do. So we're gonna go ahead and trade. Now the knight's attacking that pawn on b7. All right, trading down. Now you notice the position is insanely open, and so these two bishops, generally, they're a lot stronger than any knights in this same position. However, in this particular position, you do have the danger of the king being very exposed. As you can tell, the black king is in a lot more danger than the white king. The white king actually has a little bit of pawn cover around him, to try to help him out with, any type of danger or checks or anything like that. So, and then now we had a pair of bishops traded, and so if you notice here, we have the same pawn count, but black has the double pawns on the h file, and white has the pass pawn on the e file. And so if you notice here, this rook is basically having to babysit this pawn, and so you're not able to effectively use the rook like you normally would, as a very strong heavy piece. So Firouzja decides to go ahead and just snap off one of those h pawns, and just to go trade down and go into a pretty one-end game. I mean, a lot of times when you trade all the pieces down, and you have as you notice here, you have a 2-to-1 majority on the king side. So as long as you keep your king in the vicinity of these pawns over here, then you'll have the ability to weather a pawn storm or anything like that. All right, so you're creating a passed pawn here, and then so now this king has to always worry about this h pawn. Now, if you notice, Giri took with this king instead of with the pawn. Now, when you have end games with kings and pawns, generally what you want to do, so let's just go ahead and back up here for a touch, is you want to try to create a passed pawn that's as far away from the enemy king as possible. So in this position, of course you can do something like that there, right? But you can tell that the king is still in pretty good proximity to this pawn. And so when you take with the king, you're basically placing, so not only are you're putting your king in the way to make it harder for the king. The king's going to have to go in this type of a direction here instead of being able to come, straight over. And you're placing, just another file, away from, the king. Even though it is a rook pawn, it's still going to be something that this king is going to have to worry about, for quite a while. And so, you don't have, let's get back to this final position here. And so basically, like I said before, this king is basically having to babysit this pawn. It's having to kind of restrict itself to this area. And it's very dangerous for him to try to come even one file over, because once you push this pawn up, let's just make a random move. Once you push this pawn up, and let's say the king is here, the king is risking. What you're thinking about in king and pawn endgames is you're thinking about this square here. And basically, this, let me draw that again. Yep. Okay. So what we call this in chess endgames is called the square of the pawn. So basically, it's just kind of like a little visual way for you to calculate, if your king is by itself, basically, let's say this king is like somewhere over here, if this king has the ability to stop this pawn. And so, as you notice, if this pawn moves one square up, it basically creates this square here. And so if this king was to take, let's say you just make another move and you move this pawn up. Okay, wait. Let's say the king moves, okay, in this position, let's say the king moves over here. Now, once you push up, this square that I drew earlier, this king is outside of it. So that way, that means this king can never come back over to try to contest this, to try to, get this pawn from queening. So back up to the actual position that we had right here. And so this king is going to be able to come over. So basically, this is another concept as well. It's called the fox and the chicken coop. And so basically, what you're doing is you're creating basically a diversion for this king. So now this king has to come over here and deal with this pawn while you're going to be over here, basically gobbling up all of these pawns. And then you're going to end up with, let's say you get a trade here. King goes over here. This king can, like I said before, with the square of the pawn, the king can never go too far away. So as of right now, he really can only go to this square, to try to make sure that he's back in the square of this pawn. And so this king basically has free reign to go over here and gobble up, all of these pawns, and he's going to create his own pawn. So you have this pawn and you have this pawn that are both talking about going down to the end of the board. That's just something that the king is just not going to be able to, weather legitimately by itself. So it's just an overwhelming end game for, black to try to deal with. So, Anish Giri went ahead and resigned. And so this gave Alireza Firouzja his third win as with the white pieces in his first super tournament. And so, for him to be 16 years old, that's something that's pretty crazy. But, usually the best chess players are real young, they're stuff. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Like I said, go ahead and subscribe and like. And if there is any other games from these two tournaments, the Tata Steel 2020 or the Norway Chess 2020 that you want me to, do a little playthrough and some light analysis on, go ahead and shoot me a comment and let me know. All right, guys, I appreciate it.